around your picture when it does. All right, I'm doing it.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this community webinar. I'm just going to wait a few moments for attendees. It's just 7 o'clock now on the 21st. I'm going to just wait a few moments for attendees to come in. If you are watching this on the recorded version online, you can probably skip forward a minute or two. Whilst we are waiting for anyone else to join, I'll just quickly read what's on the screen now in terms of what tonight is for, which is to help explain the project, to introduce the proposals and explain the next steps, and an opportunity for our council officers here to listen to questions or suggestions and provide some initial responses to those questions or suggestions. What tonight is not for is discussing specific issues relevant to particular residents. Please add these to the consultation, and we'll be talking about the consultation in the presentation shortly. And it's also not to make a decision right now about the project's implementation. So I'll just give it another 30 seconds or so and we will begin. Okay, it's 2 minutes past, so we'll get going. Firstly, I'll introduce myself. My name is John Parrott. I'll be facilitating this webinar this evening. I work for a company called ECF, and I'm going to introduce the 3 council officers that I've got here, Liz, Richard and Aga in that order. Over to you, Liz.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. My name's Liz Rhodes. I'm the Healthy Streets Public Relations Manager.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Richard and I am the Healthy Streets Programme Director.
Hi everyone, I'm Agnieszka Jezierska and I'm the Project Manager for this project. Thank you.
Great, thank you, team. And I'll just go quickly through the agenda now. So I'm going to cover off a bit of housekeeping first. Then Richard's going to talk about the background to this project and the case for change. That will be followed by Aga and Liz doing the project presentation, which will include the aims and overviews of the proposals, communications and engagement, and the next steps for this project. We'll then convene back to me for a facilitated question and answer session, and there'll be instructions on how you as participants tonight can pose questions that we'll pick up and then answer. So can I have the next slide, please, Aga? So in terms of housekeeping, please use the Q&A function that you can see on Teams there to ask questions. You can ask them, you can start posing questions sort of throughout and we'll pick them up at the end, but please pose them on there. We will be answering questions following the presentation, so we will not be stopping to answer questions until the presentation is completed. Following this webinar, we will update the frequently asked questions section on the project page, and we'll talk about the project page as part of the communication section on this presentation, which are those questions based on tonight's questions that we get. Comments and suggestions received via the question and answer function tonight will not be published. However, the project team will be reviewing all of them. If you have comments or suggestions, please post them separately to your questions. This webinar has been recorded and will be published on the project page. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please, Aga? So I'm going to hand over to Richard now, who's going to do the background and case for change before passing over for the project presentation. Richard.
Thanks, John. Yeah, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming along. So just before I go into a little bit more detail on the sort of case for change and why we're bringing forward this project along with a number of others across the borough, I thought it'd just be useful just to go through a bit of the history of the work that's been happening around this area. So I think works really started, and engagement started back in 2015 when we were looking at options for redesigning this road, the A1010, along its entire route, so effectively down from 4th Street and Edmonton Green in the south all the way up to the up to the north at sort of Freezy Water. And then those projects over the years, along with a separate project at Ponders End at South Street, have been brought forward and been implemented, with the northern section of the 810 North route being completed last year. So now what we're looking at doing is looking at that section north of the Ponders End South Street scheme up to Nag's Head Junction, where there is, that's the remaining section that needs to be completed out of the entire route. So there has been some initial work commenced on bus stop borders on that section, although that's paused at the moment, and we may come on to that a little bit later. And that's just to improve for bus passengers the current provision. And now we're moving into the engagement with the businesses and residents and other community members and stakeholders about what the rest of this particular project might look like, with a view to getting inputs from everybody and from yourselves, so that can help shape the final design and the timeline for the next steps. I think my colleague Aga will cover later. Next slide, please. So as I've touched on, this is one project, but it's part of a wider program. It's part of a wider Healthy Streets program, which is all about trying to create longer term change, and change really in terms of how people travel around, particularly for short journeys. So at the moment, transportation makes up a large amount of the borough's emissions, and then within the context of a climate emergency, it's essential that the council takes steps to help reduce those overall motor vehicle emissions, and a key way of doing that is helping to encourage more people to walk and cycle some of their journeys. So that's the broader context. And if we go to the next slide, we can have a look at just some of the sort of the policy and the guidance that's in place to encourage local authorities and councils to take this type of action. So more locally, in the middle there, we've got the Enfield Council itself has declared its own climate emergency within the borough, and there's an action plan there that sets out some of the activities that we need to do, including encouraging more people to walk and cycle. So that's at a local level. At a London level, there's the Mayor's Transport Strategy, a document that's been around for a couple of years that sets out a long-term plan, again, a plan over the next sort of 20 years or so, about how we need to encourage more Londoners to walk and cycle and use public transport for the majority of their journeys, and reduce the overall number of private motor car journeys. And we've got the climate sort of emergency, but also there's a sort of practical approach that the Mayor's Transport Strategy is also focusing on, in that with the population of the city growing, how are we going to keep our roads operating and people moving around and the network working? And we can't achieve that by continued increasing private car use. We need to offer people much more alternatives of how they move around, so that everybody, and so that those people who need to use cars for some of their journeys, they're able to do so, and the roads are not fully clogged with everybody using cars for relatively short journeys. And then on the far right, we've got a Department for Transport and Government direction and guidance, which is providing real clarity to local authorities about the type of interventions that we need to be doing, to address a lot of these issues. So a real common view, really, of the type of things that we should be doing, and then often the conversation and the detail as part of this engagement is about then understanding the specifics of how we might do that in this particular project, and how the local community can shape and influence the particular details of this project. Next slide, please. So I've talked about this challenge of increasing motor vehicle miles in London, and this slide just shows you a little bit more detail of that more locally here in Enfield. So we can see from this slide, the blue line is showing just cars and taxis. The black line is all motor vehicles, and you can see the trend for the last sort of 10 years or so has been, you know, upwards in terms of the number of motor miles that are being travelled in the borough. So this is taking us in a place that is going to cause us all significant problems in the future. Now, you know, the pandemic and the challenges that everybody's been through over recent months and you know, right the way through last year and this year has influenced and impacted the number of motor journeys, certainly with lockdown and such like. So no doubt, as we expand this graph out, we'll see a drop down, but the sense is that you know, the activity on our roads and private motor vehicle use is you know, recovering, if you like, and that so that this problem is likely to persist unless we do something about it. So overall, motor vehicle miles is a challenge. On the next slide, we then just have a look actually, and this is you know, relevant to a number of projects, but this is showing you the type of roads that are seeing that increase in motor vehicles. So at the top, the green line, we've got A roads, so like the A1010 and the Hertford Road that we're talking about today. On those sort of key roads, the traffic has been sort of broadly static. Likewise on motorways and B roads, which is the blue and the red line at the bottom of the graph. But where we've seen our smaller residential roads have absorbed a lot of this increase in motor vehicle miles, and this again has happened over the last 10 years, sort of broadly in line with the introduction of sat navs being quite routine in cars and other handheld devices where people are just putting in their A to B destinations, and the computer is guiding them down a route that it deems to be the quickest, and that often used in sort of residential roads and streets. So a number of our projects want to look to address that issue, but also what we do need to ensure is that if we are looking to reassign motor traffic off much smaller residential streets that have not really been designed to carry that volume of traffic, that our primary road network, roads like the A1010, are designed in such a way that people can cycle and walk and cross safely these type of key roads. Next slide, please. So just a few snippets from the Mayor's transport strategy, just illustrating again the sheer volume of journeys per day that could potentially be walked or cycled for some people, but making this point that if we want to encourage more people to choose alternative ways, then we've got to create an environment where they feel that that's safe to do so. We've done some research in Enfield that has illustrated to us that the #1 reason why people don't choose to walk and cycle, or certainly cycle, is that they feel that it's just too dangerous to share the roads with the current volumes of traffic. So we want to redesign our environment to that last point, excuse me, to make walking and cycling much more appealing, and over time really change the way that people move around for some of those short journeys. Next slide, please. Just a few more little snippets from the Mayor's transport strategy. So as well as the climate crisis, we've got an obesity crisis, particularly in our young people who are just not getting the right levels or sufficient levels of physical activity. So if we can help encourage people at a younger age to travel more actively, then that can be really beneficial for their sort of through life, and help protect them from a whole range of sort of medical conditions in later life, and associated with that is by reducing the overall level of motor vehicles, we can over the longer term look to increase the level of air quality. Next slide, please. So I've talked about the Healthy Streets programme. There are a whole series of elements and different projects that make up that. Some are sort of illustrated on this slide here, and it's by bringing together all these different elements that we feel that we can make the change that we need to see. So the project tonight is a very important one locally at Ponders End, but it's part of a bigger picture. Next slide, please. And here we have what we call the Healthy Streets indicators. So these come from the Mayor's Transport Strategy, and these are some of the things that we can consider when we're trying to get a feel for how healthy we feel a street currently is. And we can score a lot of these different indicators that you can see around the graphic here. And then we can think about how we might, what interventions, what things we would want to do to help make that a healthier street, how we can improve the crossings, how we can make provision where people feel it's safer to cross the road, people feel it's safer to cycle, where there's places to stop and relax, and some shelter, and these kind of factors. So that's what sort of is underpinning a lot of our work. Next slide, please. So I think that gives you an overview of the background to the wider programme, and I'm now going to pass over to my colleague Aga, who can cover some more specifics on this particular project.
Thank you, Richard. So I will, like I mentioned, I will just briefly go over the aims and overview of the proposals, which you should have also received in the letter. We are upgrading the section of High Street, which is 8 and 10, between Southbury Road and Naxhead Junction and Pondesend Park. On the next slide, I will sort of talk around the map that is there, to show the extent, but I'm sure you'll be aware sort of the area. In terms of the aim of the project, we are also sort of wanting to help that environment be better for all the users. So rather than just be sort of a car driven and car focused, like we've covered on previous slides, is really all about change. We have to encourage that sort of the habits from early age and have that provision. So the provision is there so people feel sort of safe and encouraged to use those streets, like we've seen on the wheel. So this is very much a project that sort of helps to deliver that agenda, that MTF Mass Transport Strategy agenda. This project specifically also follows on from previous project, again, like we've touched on earlier, that have been sort of implemented to the north and to the south of this particular scheme. So it's sort of bridging that gap in the provision. And it will also include resurfacing. So there's going to be fairly significant changes in terms of sort of changing the curb line, upgrading the crossing that I'll cover in a second. So really to improve on the existing condition, but also feel and look of the street, on the environment as people walk and cycle through this area. Like we sort of mentioned, there's going to be cycle facilities on both sides of the road. So by facility, we mean sort of a mixture of lanes and the track. So this section specifically lies on C1 TfL route, and at this stage we sort of still finalizing those designs, but when it comes to presenting the designs, once they are finalized, obviously you'll be able to see which sections are sort of lighter segregations, which are sort of cycle tracks. We are also looking at introducing 20 miles per hour speed limit to support those changes, again, to help the environment be safer. And we are also looking to introduce that speed limit slightly beyond the scheme area, so to the south of the scheme area. And in terms of changes to the parking and sort of loading restrictions that are currently there, they will be sort of in a way a natural sort of consequence and part of the scheme. Partially, it's obviously habits sort of forming and shaping and enabling, or in this case disabling, and partially it's a consequence to providing a facility. So obviously we would be sort of looking at obviously prioritizing and enabling cyclists to use that sort of curb line, if you like. So there's going to be sections obviously where loading will not be possible because of the sort of narrow carriageway space. Obviously space is limited, and there's going to be sections when that loading will be timed. So we are, as we mentioned, we are currently engaging with businesses specifically on that aspect to sort of understand their needs as much as possible, and to sort of ask them, and we've asked them to help us sort of shape that design, what that design, future design will look like. So this is something that we're still working through. And this is the slide I mentioned earlier. So in sort of orange, you will see the sort of indicative project sort of area that I mentioned earlier. So to the north is Nags Head Southbury Road 8 and 10 junction. This is the big signalized junction right next to Tesco, which is here, and then with Ponders End Park just here on the right hand side. So there is a courtesy crossing that you may recall pretty much at the end of the park. So this is where the scheme, this particular scheme sort of ends. And in terms of the scope, we would be looking at converting or upgrading, if you like, 2 existing courtesy crossings. So one is just here by sort of Tesco pedestrian access, if you like, sort of to the north of Garfield Road. So that we are looking at option to sort of convert that, upgrade that to zebra crossing. Similarly, there is a slightly different but also a courtesy crossing just there. Sorry. Yes, just there by the bus stops, and that will also be converted into zebra crossing. The existing signalized crossing is to remain, and there is also a small sort of courtesy crossing just to the south of Queensway, and that will be removed altogether because of the provision that sort of, as we sort of reviewed and upgraded 2 other crossings. With that in mind, decision was made to remove this one. And the blue dashed line represent the proposed cycle facility, with black being the existing facility, like we mentioned. So this is, as you can see, sort of bridging that gap. And like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a mixture of cycle lanes, cycle tracks, which is still something that we are sort of refining. We are, as well as those facilities, as in lanes and tracks, we are also looking at possibly sort of implementing a cycle parking, and they are also sort of already available to park, to sort of lock your bike to them there at the moment. And we are also looking, what I mentioned, to introduce 20 miles per hour speed limit, which we are also looking to extend sort of beyond the scheme area, slightly to the south. So I'll pass on to Liz to cover communication and engagement section of the presentation.
Thanks, Aga. You just go to the next. Thank you. So this is the project page. It's on the Let's Talk Enfield site. Everyone, I think, would be aware of this page and have used it to register for this webinar tonight. So as you can see, there's information about the project. We've got frequently asked questions on there. You can also subscribe to updates on the project, so I encourage you to do that. There's also a document section, and this will be also where any upcoming engagement and consultation opportunities are posted with information, but also the surveys and other tools will be hosted on there as well. Thank you. In terms of the activities that we've carried out so far, other than what's been said by Richard tonight in earlier years, we've recently been engaging with the emergency services. We've also met with the mosque and other stakeholder groups in the area. We work closely with the ward councillors, and we've run a couple of briefings with them. We've sent out letters to residents, businesses and other organisations about the project, and we'll continue to do that. We have the project pages I've just mentioned, and we also have the webinars this evening. So before tonight's community webinar, we also ran a webinar for businesses in the area. Thank you. In terms of what's coming up, like I said, the project page is the main source of information, and that's where we will be posting updates as the project progresses. So please continue to stay checking that and stay engaged in that way. We'll be posting the updated design option on the project page. The notification letter about statutory consultation will be sent out to residents, businesses and others in the area. Like I said, the statutory consultation will be hosted on the project page, or you can write to us or email us. And should this project be approved, we'll be sending out a construction notification letter. So I'm going to hand back to Aga, who's going to cover next steps.
Thank you. So as we have sort of mentioned throughout the presentation, we are currently engaging with residents, community and businesses specifically on loading. There's also a ward forum that is anticipated to take place with, I think, as I understand, date to be confirmed. And the project to be hopefully discussed at that ward forum. We are also planning to carry out some surveys, so you may see sort of pieces of equipment, if you like, being installed, and cameras and sort of so-called tubes on the road. So this is to sort of further help with finalizing the designs. Once the surveys are completed, we have completed the engagement, gathered all the feedback. We then sort of hope to finalize that design, and then on that design we will sort of update our EQIA, which is Equality sort of Impact Assessment Report, which we obviously have done from the onset of the project, but it's an ongoing live document, if you like, ongoing process, so that will be also updated, and once updated and finalized will also be uploaded to the project page. Similarly, there's a safety audit that will be carried out as well, which we have carried out in the past, but this one again will be updated, so everything obviously is designed with safety in mind. And that is hoped to be sort of completed by the end of this year. Then early next year we will be sort of advertising the project with all the details, where this will be a statutory consultation where everybody will be able to sort of submit their comments and provide feedback, and then obviously we will be drafting a sort of a report, and then subject to the outcome of that consultation, we will be commencing the works in sort of early in spring 2022, and then again subject to designs, how they will be finalized, what exactly will be built. The timescales again will be sort of dictated and driven by that. So again, the completion of the works, it will be around spring summer next year. And please, if you have any questions on any of those either steps or the slide I've mentioned earlier, there is a website, so sort of an email address that you can sort of use to contact us. It's also on the website. It's Enfield, it's Healthy Streets. It's Healthy Streets at enfield.gov.uk. You will see that at the end of the presentation. And like I said, it's also on the website in the sort of who is listening section of the page. So please do send us your comments or feedback. Obviously, today at the end we will have a chance also to sort of answer your questions and your feedback as well. And I will hand over to John now.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you to Liz, to Aga and to Richard for your presentation. I'm hoping that members of the community on this webinar this evening and those watching it online found that an informative presentation. It's now time for the Q&A section before we wrap up this evening. So please use the Q&A function to ask questions. Also use the Q&A tool the project page to ask further questions sort of following tonight, and also we will update the FAQ question section of the project page based on tonight's question, as I said at the beginning. So I'll just take a moment just to say I think we've had some questions have come in. Just double checking, and I think there are, so I'm just going to go to these questions and look at them now. I think the first question may be one that you're able to answer, Liz. I'll just read it out now. It was people were sort of asking where the letter was mailed to. I think somebody, one of the participants, lives off Lincoln Road, and can you just say what where were the letters mailed to? What was the distribution area for the letters that we talked about?
Yeah, sure. Aga, feel free to pipe in as well. But it was in, I mean, there would have been probably 100 or 150 meters around the project area. So around the high street is where we delivered to. You know, taking into account some full lengths of road and some not. It's I don't have the map in front of me right now. I am happy to follow up if that's helpful for that person over the email. We use a delivery company who post the letters through the doors. Sometimes they get missed, or sometimes they're collected by neighbours if it's a shared door. So we do receive delivery reports to confirm where those letters were delivered to. So that's something I can follow up with the delivery company.
Great, thank you. And perhaps when we add the FAQs to the meeting, it might be useful just to show that map, or just to clarify for the purpose of everyone else what their mailing area was. That would be good. Thank you very much, Liz. We now have a question which may be fit for you, Aga. It's about the crossing. The crossing by the park has only been put down while doing this strip of road. Is this to come back to make up a zebra crossing? So I'll just repeat that. Sorry, the crossing by the park on that map that you showed earlier has only just been put down, has only been installed when doing this strip of road. Is this to come back to make a zebra crossing?
Yes, so it's that crossing. Yes, it wasn't obviously intention to sort of implement with sort of a view to remove that. Obviously, this project then came later, and we initially weren't going to actually change that crossing. It was going to stay as it is. We were simply reviewing sort of provisional across along the section, sort of and across that project. And given the provision that was in, obviously the northern section, that was the point when decision was made to convert that into zebra crossing. That's what sort of best in the context of the scheme. So I understand that obviously this is a fairly sort of recent implementation, but obviously we are driven sort of by sort of overall benefits and overall scheme sort of, if you like, approach, and we can't really be you know, we obviously have, you know, we understand that it has been implemented recently, but that has been sort of the overall deciding factor, if you like. I don't know if Richard wants to add to this.
Yeah, I can add to that. So I think what we the current crossing is a sort of courtesy crossing that's there in place, that is similar to the crossings that have been used in the wider South Street scheme, but does actually sit outside of that scheme. So we think that whilst it's separate to that scheme, there for that particular crossing, there are benefits for taking a more formal zebra crossing approach, which we think will provide you know, good level of service for people crossing at that park point. So in the scheme of things, that is a relatively low you know, small piece of work that was done as part of the much more major scheme that's all collectively you know, held together around South Street. So we think it's worth looking at potentially making some changes to that. But that's something something that we can hear through the through the engagement and the consultation process that's to follow.
Great, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Aga, for addressing that question. I've got another one here that I'd just like to put to the council officers. I'll just read it out to you. Are residents aware that double yellow lines will put in front of their houses for the cycle lanes to be implemented? Is that one that Richard or Aga, one of you can talk to, please?
Yeah, I can take that one. So I think that's part of what we're talking about and what we're sharing with looking at the outline plans. So and that's why we've been going through through to businesses, and that's why through this engagement and things we're explaining what the scope of the project is. So as people will have seen on other stretches of the route, we've now done, as I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, long stretches on the A1010, both north and south of this location, and where you want to put in cycling facilities, there are the potential for further restrictions on car parking as well. So within this town centre stretch, there are already some sort of dedicated parking bays that we'll be looking to maintain, and there's some parking provision on surface roads as well. So that's one of the things that we want to work through as part of the design process, and that's a conversation that we'll need to have with the community throughout the engagement and the consultation process.
Great, thank you very much, Richard. And there's two more questions here which I'm going to read out. The first one is, are elderly people aware that they will feel unsafe in order to board a bus, as they will have to cross the cycle lane? Are we able just to clarify what that situation is, please?
Yeah, I can take that one as well. That's okay. So at the moment, within this stretch of road, there are, I think, 4 what we call bus stop borders that were implemented as part of the South Street scheme further south. So actually what we're looking to do is look at the ways that we've designed some of those bus stop borders on other schemes, and look to improve and develop the existing bus stop borders that are already in place along this stretch of High Street. So we're not proposing to remove them, but we are proposing to improve the design of the ones that are currently there, and that's really come about through a whole series of work that's taken place as we've reviewed bus stop borders across the borough, and also as we've worked with Transport for London to look at what is the best way that we can design those environments, so that the design helps clarify that when a bus is parked at that bus stop, that people getting on and off the bus have priority, and for the rest of the time where there's no bus picking up or dropping off, that we maintain that continued connection and facility that people, whether they be young or old, can use to sort of cycle safely along this route. But again, thoughts and feedback on that can all come through as part of the consultation.
Indeed, and we'll, as I say, we'll be capturing these in the FAQs, and so thank you. I've got a couple of questions on parking, but before I come to them, a separate person has asked a follow-up question about buses, so I'm just going to read that out, if I may, Richard and Aga, and then I'll come to the questions about parking. So the question is, when buses are running early, it is a major problem when they just sit at bus stops. It stops the flow of traffic. So it's a comment as much as a question, but I think you may be able to add some commentary to that, Richard or Aga.
I wonder if this is the situation where the drivers change over rather than because they arrive early, because that is where the bus drivers actually change. So that will still be the case. So you will still see buses sort of stopping there for longer. And this is something we definitely are very aware of, and sort of provision of zebra crossing will help mitigate that, and will help sort of to remove that pinch point. So we definitely are looking at the designs with that in mind, not to create pinch points and delays while buses are sort of stopping there for longer to change over.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just going to go back to the parking question. So it's How are you going to enforce parking, as there are still issues with this along the cycle route south of Ponders End? Richard or Aggo, one of you able to talk to that one?
Yes, so definitely once some sort of elements perhaps have been faded and maybe not, I suppose well enforced over some time recently. So definitely it's something that, as the scheme is implemented and you sort of clear signage and clear sort of road marking provided, we would definitely be looking to enforce this. It's something that we have, it's discussed and we would be looking to do.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And
I'll just add to that.
Of course.
That so if there are particular areas where people feel that that people are parking in existing cycle lanes, and obviously the potential danger that can cause to people that are choosing to cycle, then there is a report, a function where you can contact our enforcement colleagues, and particularly if there's an area where you've identified that as a sort of a hotspot, and then that helps the council focus its enforcement resources, to keep an eye on particular troublesome areas. So I would encourage, and maybe that's something that we can put on the project page, Liz, just to link to how you report those problems if they're occurring elsewhere.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, if you could put it on the project page, and maybe also, if deemed appropriate, if we put it when we're doing the FAQ for this question, maybe add it to there as well, just that reporting thing. I think hopefully community members would find that useful. Thank you both. So there's one more question in here. Are we expecting more bikes using cycle lanes only? They are not used much at them. They are not used much at all if they are used. What are the local authorities' percentage of bikes? Has it gone up? It's sort of a two-part question. Richard or Aggo, did you get that?
I could take that one as well, perhaps. So so we've got various counter locations at different points in the borough. There is one particular location on our first cycle route in Palmer's Green where we regularly publish the data of the usage, and what we're seeing year on year is an incremental growth in the people that are using the facilities. There's a certain seasonal element to that, but for sure we're expecting more people in the future. I touched on at the beginning how this is part of a longer term change program, and one of the things that we need to do in order to encourage more people to cycle, for example, is make sure that the network is joined up. And at the moment, this section provides a gap in the route, which is likely to discourage some people from taking the bicycle if they know that they come to a certain point where the route stops, before there's any provision for them, further down the road. So making sure that we have a joined up network of consistent and good quality standard facilities and space for people to cycle is important. And as that network grows and we connect and join up more places where we think that people want to visit and move and get around to, then I'd anticipate that we'll continue to see a continued growth in the people that are traveling that way. The alternative, what is the alternative? So if we've talked already about seeing a steady increase in motor vehicle miles year on year, our roads will get increasingly congested. Our population is expected and anticipated to grow, and with that an implied growth in private motor vehicle ownership. So we'll get to the point at some stage where our roads are just not going to function properly. So we take that into account, and we take into account the current climate emergency, and we come to the conclusion that actually doing something to enable more people to travel more sustainably is the right thing to do at this current time. How we do that and how we develop and shape the design of our projects is something that we're very much interested in getting the input of local community members.
Thank you for that extensive answer, Richard. Thank you. There's another one about cycling here, which, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think is a sort of balance between sort of design aesthetics versus sort of engineering and safety. And the question is, the cycle lane poles are very unsightly. is there an alternative? And I'm assuming that's like an alternative design or look. If Richard or Aga, are able to address that question, please.
I'll do that one as well. Sorry to be hogging the questions, but or the answers. So I think that they again will take feedback on that. I think, you know, what we have to balance off is different people's views on the aesthetics of those, and the function that they provide in terms of providing some segregation of space between people who are cycling and who are by the nature of their transport choice more vulnerable, and how that helps keep motor vehicles out of that safe space for cycling. So I appreciate that some people might not find them visually appealing, but you know, arguably their importance of their function, you know, maybe that needs to be prioritized. There are different products on the market, and the market evolves. So I think, you know, it's right that we continue to look at the different types of things that we could use, but you know, fundamentally we need something that's got some sort of reflective capabilities, that is sort of reasonably flexible, and there's not a whole range of different things to choose from, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Richard. And one more question here about traffic flows and traffic volumes. With the new housing on this strip of road, will this not cause more traffic flow? Aga, are you able to suggest a response to that one?
I'm not sure if, Richard, you have more information in terms of whether this development is it's sort of car-free development. We may be able to sort of follow up on that as well and provide a response to that if you email us again on healthystreets@enfield.gov.uk. But in terms of this scheme, I would sort of, so obviously the scheme is proposing obviously cycle facility and pedestrians improvements, and obviously with the development definitely there's going to be more pedestrians and hopefully users of public transport, and obviously hopefully cyclists. The scheme isn't there to mitigate sort of development on this street or even in the sort of surrounding area, if you like. I'm not sure if I can sort of add more to that, really. Even if there is sort of traffic generated, that scheme really isn't there to sort of determine that or mitigate that, if you like.
No, thank you, Aga, for having a go at answering that question. I appreciate that, but let's also take that one back. As I say, if the person posing the question wants to sort of put that into the Healthy Streets address, then perhaps consulting other people and probably in the Highways Department, we may be able to get something. But thank you very much. Right, that concludes the questions that we've had tonight. So what I just want to sort of say before we wrap up is thank you very much for the community participants that have attended this sort of live webinar tonight. And thank you for the questions that you've posed. Hopefully that was useful. There may be some more questions that we haven't got to, particularly that I think there's one about wards that again we can sort of follow up with afterwards, just in terms of what we're doing, and also those that are watching this webinar online. If you want to, community members watching it online at a later date, if you want to ask any questions at any time of the project team, then please do so via that email address that's on screen now, healthystreets@enfield.gov.uk. So thank you very much. Hopefully that was useful and informative. Thank you for taking time to participate, and goodbye for now.